Who are going to be the DC villains for each individual project? My video on who will be the main villain in the DCU is getting a lot of attention right now, and it's also getting a lot of you talking, and I absolutely love it. Now, I was requested by a viewer named OK, who asked if I could make a video on who could be the villains for each individual project that has been confirmed. So I am going to do that, but for this video, I'm going to hold it to the movies only, because if I included the TV shows as well, this video would be well over an hour. So we'll start with movies, and then another video will be about the TV shows. So I'm not saying that these villains in these projects won't be the main threat of the DCU. There's absolutely a chance that Superman introduces a big enough villain for the future. There's a chance that Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, does the same thing. There's even a chance that Swamp Thing introduces the main threat. Although I am gonna say for these first few movies, personally, I do think they're going to use villains that, hey, maybe used in the future, will be referenced, but they won't be the main threat. Regardless of that, let's get into the first movie and some of my predictions and ideas on who could be the main villain of the Superman film. I actually have a couple of villains that I think could be the main threat to this movie. I 100% think Lex Luthor is going to be involved in some way. Even if Luthor is not the main antagonist in the film, I still think he will be an antagonist, or will simply just be in the movie in general. So I guess you could say that I am banking on the idea that Lex Luthor will be the villain or a villain of the Superman film, but I actually have 3 other villain choices as well. First of all, and I've mentioned this in my main villain DCU video, Brainiac. I think Brainiac would be awesome to see on screen. My opinion, as I've mentioned in that video, whereas Brainiac, I think, would be an awesome main villain of the DCU for the next 10 or how many ever years, I just get this feeling that if they're going to use Brainiac, they, at least to start, want to solidify him as a Superman-only villain. If my feelings on that are true, Brainiac could be a really good beginning for Superman's first villain in a DCU. Villain number 2 I think they could use in this movie is Metallo. And I think Metallo is not only a great combatant for Superman, I think Metallo is a great beginning for a Superman villain. This is a character who shares similar feats as Superman, and pretty much only because of the kryptonite in his chest. But what that could do for audiences and fans is the fact that, okay, kryptonite exists. We will see the exploration of kryptonite later on in the future of the DCU. It will also show that whereas Superman can essentially beat anyone and anything, he is finally being faced up against an enemy who literally has kryptonite in their metallic body. How is he gonna beat this character? This would be a fantastic way to really humanize the character of Superman through the eyes of Lex Luthor, considering that is what Lex Luthor wants to do to Superman. He hates the fact that he has this power. He hates the fact that he is viewed as a god, and this is his way to bring him down to our level. The third villain I have in mind, and I'll be honest with you, as cool as I think it would be to see this character on screen, I don't fully know why I have this character in my head, and I think it's because every time I think of James Gunn making Superman, I think of obscure things, obscure characters that many directors and writers and creatives in general wouldn't really use. James Gunn will use them, and for some reason, all I can think of is Parasite. Parasite would be another villain that could bring him down to our level the way Metallo does. Even though Superman is a god and sometimes he's even higher than a god, that obviously doesn't mean Superman doesn't have his vulnerabilities. And having a villain who could simply just touch him and take pieces of his power away from him, even if it's only temporarily, that would be a huge battle for Clark to overcome. You could have the world look at Superman, you could have some of his future antagonists look at Superman, and essentially see the fact that, oh, Superman is beatable under the right circumstances, especially a good-hearted Superman, somebody who does not go out of his way to kill or cause harm. It'll now make it easier to find a way to stop the Man of Steel. Those are some of my options for the Superman movie, although at the end of the day, if it were up to me, I think the very first villain of a Superman movie would be Metallo. He would be my number one choice. And that would be a perfect way to get Lex Luthor involved, considering Lex Luthor could essentially create Metallo and send him off to fight Superman. Next up, we have Batman the Brave and the Bold. Now, of course, the number one detail that we all know is that Damian Wayne is involved in this film as Robin. We don't really have many details on this movie at all, other than the fact that it is Batman and Robin. There could be so many villains that they could go up against, so many threats that could be involved in this movie. Just the same way that I personally think Lex Luthor is going to be involved in the Superman movie, whether or not he is the main threat, I think it's going to work the same way with the League of Shadows. Once again, yes, I know it's the League of Assassins. I just think League of Shadows sounds cooler. I think the League of Shadows will be heavily involved in this Batman film. Now, clearly, James Gunn is moving forward into the future of the Bat family. It does not seem like we are starting at the beginning of the Bat family. We are starting in the middle of it, or maybe even at the end of it. And if that's the case, that means that a lot of his villains have been around for quite some time. I could see Talia being the League leader instead of Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul could potentially be dead at this point, or who knows what's going on with his character, but I do have a feeling we won't see Ra's. It will be Talia who's leading this group. This could be a situation, considering Bruce is now working with his son Damian. Maybe Bruce also needs to work with the League, and in that comes this passive-aggressive emotion, knowing he does not like the League, but knowing that the only way to catch the true threat is to work with that team, and also considering he has a son with Talia. This Batman film is a little obscure because usually when you look at Batman and when you have details of a new movie, you're capable of saying, okay, I know, or I think I know who the villain of this film is. For this one, we still don't have enough details. They could do so many different things here. Maybe this is far left field. Maybe this is very bold. I think the villain of this Batman film could potentially be Deathstroke. For so many years, we have wanted to see Batman fight Deathstroke on the big screen. I mean, guys, we were almost there. We almost got the Ben Affleck Batman movie where he was going to fight Deathstroke on screen. Now, we all wanted to see Joe Manganiello as Deathstroke. It's clear that he really wants to play Deathstroke and really wishes that Batman film moved forward. Other than the fact that there have been rumors over the past couple of months, maybe even the past year, that Joe is not done with the character, he could potentially be one of the few actors from the DCEU who will move forward in the DCU as their same character, but also the fact that Joe's age works perfectly with Deathstroke. Deathstroke is usually older, and he does have enhanced age capabilities, although Deathstroke is usually like 50, 60, maybe even 70. Joe is 46. He's not super old by any means, but they can make him look older, and I think it would be a perfect opportunity for him to come back. Once again, this Batman film could feature anybody. We could get another Joker, we could get Clayface, Mr. Freeze, Hush, you name it. We could get so many different people. Although I think this is the perfect opportunity to introduce Deathstroke as a main threat to Batman and even create a rapport between the two of them for the future of the DCU. Now, let's move into the Authority and who the villain could be here. Well, once again, another obscure group where we're going to have to potentially find another obscure villain for this group. Never would I thought the day would come where I'd be talking about the villain of an upcoming Authority movie, but here we are. Choice number one is easy. It could simply just be Superman. I think Superman is going to be in that movie. Do I think he'll be at the beginning, maybe a little bit of it in the middle, or just at the end? Yes, there's a possibility where he's not in it that much, just for a specific time period. Or Superman could actually be the threat of the Authority, and we get to see the perspective of the Authority on how they view Superman. Maybe they don't view Superman as such a good guy, or maybe a guy who's not willing to do enough to stop crime. And because of that, it essentially just makes them upset with the Superman character, and they want to teach him a lesson. This is how you do things, not by being a Boy Scout. We could stop it right there. Simple. Superman is the threat of the Authority. But I don't think it is going to be that simple because, once again, James Gunn loves his obscurity. He loves these really rare, if you will, unique, but very strange characters. He loves diving deep into the gallery, into the encyclopedia of these characters, in which maybe some of us, if not 80, 90% of the fan base, possibly hasn't even heard of before. Now, the Authority tends to fight this group called the Americans. And the way I understand it, they are a group who are opposite Authority. Their threat could be Dr. Krigstein, the creator of the Americans, and the leader of the Americans, Commander. I mean, let alone look at a photo of Dr. Krigstein. You're going to tell me right now James Gunn wouldn't love to get his fingers on a character like that? Of course he would. That is such a strange looking and weird character that James Gunn would love to use. Or we could use another guy named Godhead. And this is a guy who can essentially dispel a psychic virus, and whoever is affected by it, their strength or abilities are now part of his. And that might be an easy but a very convenient villain for a group like the Authority to go up against. But once again, even if Superman is not going to be used as the main antagonist for the Authority in their movie, I think Superman will be used the same way Luthor will be used in his film, and the League of Shadows will be used in the Batman film. Superman will be there in that movie. All right, then we have Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and I was trying to think of who the villain could be for this film, considering a lot of it is going to take place in outer space. We're probably going to see a bunch of different solar systems, planets, maybe even different galaxies. We'll get to see a whole different picture of DC that we've never seen before. I can only imagine we're going to see a ton of different alien species. We're going to see homeworlds. We're going to see crazy, weird creatures. But I don't necessarily think there is any big Supergirl or Superman villain who will be the villain of this Supergirl movie, because I think they're going to heavily connect it to the actual comic book written by Tom King. I think this Supergirl movie is going to stay ever so closely knit to the source material. So because of that, I think what this is essentially going to be about is what the comic book's about. An alien girl named Ruthie, or Ruthie, however you pronounce it, Ruthye. She searches out for Supergirl to help her defeat the people who destroyed her home planet and her family. And instead of maybe having one big protagonist, you have one big group or a faction or an army that they need to take down. What I think they should do to maybe keep it interesting is to use a Kryptonian who also survived Krypton, but instead of turning out to be good like Superman and Supergirl, they end up turning mercenary or just simply bad. Once again, I'm getting obscure here and I'm digging in deep in DC Comics, but that's something Gunn will do. You could use a character like Black Flame or Zora Vylar, and she is a character who was once imprisoned in the Phantom Zone, and maybe what you could find out in the film is that she is actually the leader of this group who destroyed the alien girl's homeworld, and now Kara has to fight one of her own people. Then we have Swamp Thing, and as I keep saying, if some of the stuff I already have said hasn't been obscure enough for you, I think this will carry the most obscurity of all the projects so far. Swamp Thing is a very unique and different character that a lot of the general audience won't really know about, and maybe even some generalized fans of DC won't really know about. With Swamp Thing, I think you can do a lot of things, but I do believe you need to keep it a little more simple, because as if Swamp Thing isn't already so different enough, I don't think we can use a villain that's digging deep into the profile of his character. I think we just need to go with potentially Swamp Thing's main nemesis. Swamp Thing is stupid powerful, and believe it or not, a lot of the villains he faces are big time villains. He does have a lot of run-ins, and his power level does happen to have him deal with universal threats or a lot of magical based enemies. Although his main arch nemesis is Anton Arcane, his powers are completely based in sorcery, and he is also known to literally be the embodiment of evil, which is something that Swamp Thing is heavily against. A lot of the times, Swamp Thing is found fighting a lot of creatures and demons from hell and protecting the realm and elements of Earth. Anton Arcane would be a perfect villain for Swamp Thing to go up against in his first film. Now, there are two other villains I came up for Swamp Thing and who they could potentially use. If it's not going to be Anton Arcane, they could use Blackbriar Thorn. He is a druid who has complete control over all the elements. He can create crazy and wild storms, and he is also a master illusionist. And then the other villain I have is Floronic Man. He is a plant-human hybrid who wishes to eradicate all animal life on the planet. Now, the Green is a massive player in the character of Swamp Thing. It's super important. In the most simplest terms, it's basically this cosmic energy that can connect all of the plant life in the universe. And whereas Swamp Thing can manipulate that, so can Floronic Man. He just manipulates it in a different way, obviously for evil. Anybody who can manipulate the Green in an evil way is definitely going to catch the attention of Swamp Thing. He's not going to like that very much. At the end of the day, it could be either one of these three. It could very apparently be Anton Arcane. It could be anybody else. I could be wrong. I actually think I would go with Blackbriar Thorn. I love the idea of him being able to create the elements, and him being able to create illusions would be a tough matchup for Swamp Thing. Alright, so there you have it for the villains of all the announced DCU projects. I could be very wrong wrong on some of these. I could be very right on some of them. I think there are so many choices that they could use for each one of these characters. I mean, as of right now, with the little amount of details we have on some of these movies, the options are endless. But now, let me know in the comments below what you think of some of these. Let me know if there are villains I missed that you think could be in these movies as well. But that is all I have for you on this one, guys. So until next time, I will talk to you all very soon.